morning and welcome to this online service of Neshoba Unitarian Universalist Church in Cordova, Tennessee. I am the Reverend Beth Lefever, pleased and privileged as always to serve as the minister of this wonderful congregation, and I am so very glad that you have joined with us this morning. Our opening words are by author Peterson. Wilferd Peterson. Walk with the dreamers, he wrote, the believers, the courageous, the cheerful, the planners, the doers, the successful people with their heads in the clouds and their feet on the ground. Let their spirit ignite a fire within you to leave this world better than when you found it. In this spirit, let us be in worship together. And now our membership coordinator, Chelsea Cheshire, will light our chalice.
Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times if one only remembers to turn on the light. Please join me in the affirmation of covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God.
The Other Side by Jaqueline Woodson with illustrations by E.B. Lewis, read by Chip Jermyn. That summer, the fence that stretched through our town seemed bigger. We lived in a yellow house on one side of it. White people lived on the other. And Mama said, "Don't climb over that fence when you play." She said it wasn't safe. That summer, there was a girl who wore a pink sweater. Each morning, she climbed up on the fence and stared over at our side. Sometimes I stared back. She never sat on that fence with anybody, that girl didn't. Once, when we were jumping rope, she asked if she could play. My friend Sandra said no, without even asking the rest of us. I don't know what I would have said. Maybe yes, maybe no. That summer, everyone and everything on the other side of that fence seemed far away. When I asked my mama why, she said, because that's the way things have always been. Sometimes, when me and Mama went into town, I saw that girl with her mama. She looked sad sometimes, that girl did. Don't stare, my mama said. It's not polite. It rained a lot that summer. On rainy days, that girl sat on the fence in a raincoat. She let herself get all wet and acted like she didn't even care. Sometimes I saw her dancing around in puddles, splashing and laughing. Mama wouldn't let me go out in the rain. That's why I bought you those rainy day toys, my mama said. You stay inside here where it's warm and safe and dry. But every time it rained, I'd look for that girl, and I always found her somewhere near the fence. Someplace in the middle of the summer, the rain stopped. When I walked outside, the grass was damp and the sun was already high up in the sky, and I stood there with my hands up in the air. I felt brave that day. I felt free. I got close to the fence, and that girl asked me my name. Clover, I said. My name's Annie, she said, Annie Paul. I live over yonder, by where you see the laundry. That's my blouse hanging on the line. She smiled then. She had a pretty smile. Then I smiled too, and we stood there looking at each other, smiling. It's nice up here on the fence, Annie said. You can see all over. I ran my hand along the fence. I reached up and touched the top of it. A fence like this was made for sitting on, Annie said. She looked at me sideways. My mama said I shouldn't go to the other side, I said. My mama says the same thing, but she never said nothing about sitting on it. Neither did mine, I said. That summer, me and Annie sat together on that fence, and when Sandra and them looked at me funny, I just made believe I didn't care. Some morning, my mama watched us. I waited for her to tell me to get down from that fence before I break my neck or something, but she never did. I see you made a new friend, she said one morning, and I nodded, and Mama smiled. That summer, me and Annie sat on that fence and watched the whole wide world around us. When we were too tired to jump anymore, we sat up on that fence, all of us, in a long line. Someday, somebody's going to come along and knock down this old fence, Annie said, and I nodded. Yeah, I said, someday.
Our offering words are by author Steve Goodyear. But I give best when I give from that deeper place, when I give simply, freely, and generously, and sometimes for no particular reason. I give best when I give from my heart. Our morning offering will now be shared and gratefully received. My first reading this morning is by Anne Frank, the diarist and Holocaust victim. I know what I want. I have a goal, an opinion. I have religion and love. Let me be myself, and then I am satisfied. I know that I'm a woman with inward strength and plenty of courage. In my second reading by Audre Lorde, Black author, feminist, and civil rights activist. When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength to the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. So this sermon begins with a story I wrote in 2011. It references my then, now late husband, Evan, and it goes on for a bit, so please bear with me. The home that Evan and I share is plagued with bats, and yes, plagued is entirely an apt description. We have had, in 16 years of living in our house, about 140 incidents of bats flying throughout our home. Okay, that is an exaggeration, but we've had probably between 12 and 15 incidents, which is very close to 140. I now suffer from bat-induced PTSD to the extent that if my bangs fall in my eyes, I hit the floor. Really. The whole bat debacle began one night after Evan had already gone upstairs to bed. I had remained downstairs watching mindless television when all of a sudden a large, huge, fang-bared black bat came swooping into the living room, heading straight for my head. I screamed, daintily, as is my way, and the bat swung around and headed back into the dining room. No sooner had I gathered my wits about me and stopped screaming than the bat returned to further commune with me. Again, I screamed, more lustily this time, and again it circled back into the dining room. And so it went. Back and forth it flew in a loop, coming at me until I screamed, returning to the dining room until I became silent. Evan, bless his hero's heart, came tearing down the stairs upon hearing me scream and burst through the stairway door, ready to do battle with whatever evil was threatening the life of his wife. He looked at me, cowering in a quivering, sweat-drenched pile on the sofa. Bat, I managed before it swooshed past him toward me again, the sole focus of its mission. I screamed. It flew back into the dining room. I became quiet. It headed back toward me. Stop screaming, Evan helpfully suggested. I can't, I whimpered between screams. He urged our impressively complacent dogs into the enclosed back porch, shortly after which I managed to tear out there too to wait with them while my intrepid husband gave chase. Not to us, to the bat. Now, I don't want to be too graphic here, but for you to fully appreciate the whole scope and tenor of the bat saga, you have to understand that Evan sleeps nude. Nude, I said, yes. And wisely, upon hearing my screaming, he did not pause to clothe himself before racing to my aid. So when I say he gave chase, well, I'll leave the excitement to your imagination. He caught the frightening flying mammal in a towel just within a few moments and gently slipped it out the front door. Thus ended the first chapter of the great Bat Chronicles. Over the next period of time, we had several similar experiences with bats and terror and heroism. One time, and I kid you not, 2 bats came into the house at one time. And no, we could not figure out how they were getting in. We spent some time on it. But the worst incident of all occurred when Evan was out of town and I was alone watching a movie. Somewhere around midnight, the evildoer arrived and the screaming began. But this time, all bets were off. I was alone, and alone I had to act. I scrambled, screaming, to my feet, and ducking and dancing like the welterweight champion of the world, I managed to get the dogs and myself onto the back porch, where I frantically looked around for weapons. I grabbed a Swifty mop and a flashlight, and thus armed, cracked the door open and crept into the kitchen. From there, I slunk into the dining room, intent on making it to the front door, which I would then block open and hope for the bat's good sense to guide it through and out onto the night. We had heard that bats would fly toward the light, which is, of course, not true. Still, I waited by the open front porch door, courageously swiping the air with a Swifty every time the bat came near, and catching my breath when it flew back through the house, away from me. At one point, though, the unthinkable happened. I lost sight of the bat. This is truly the very worst case scenario because until you locate it again, you can't do anything. You can't go to the bathroom, you can't let the dogs back in, you can't go to bed, you can't go on with life with a cursed creature somewhere loose in the house. Quietly, recall I only scream when the bat is coming toward me. Quietly, I sneaked into the living room and confirmed my worst fears. The stairway door was open just a crack. Could it have gone upstairs? Oh no, 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 I moaned, rocking myself like a toddler. But it was certainly no longer swooping around the downstairs, so I stealthily made my way upstairs, my Swiftie ever at the ready. At the top of the stairs, I turned and carefully peeked around the corner. There it was, sitting on the floor at the end of the hall, as though awaiting its bedtime snack of blood and cookies. I ducked into the bathroom, frantically considering the possibilities. I somehow had to make the bat go downstairs without detouring into the bathroom, in which I stood, trembling. So periodically I would peek out at the massive mini monster, stomp my foot and wave the Swiftie mop, ducking back into the bathroom, and then slamming the door, but for a small crack through which to keep watch. Finally, I saw it flutter past the bathroom and on down the stairs. I followed, slamming the stairway door behind me. By now, the bat was as exhausted as I. We'd been at this for more than an hour, and it was flying closer and closer to the floor while I slunk lower and lower beneath it. Eventually, I was lying flat out, weakly flailing at the air with my Swiftie and screaming hoarsely with every low pass it made. Finally, too embarrassed to call anyone I knew and realizing that the oddly oblivious neighbors were not going to race to my aid, I released my last shred of self-respect and called the police. Then I sat on the threshold between the front porch and the living room, awaiting their arrival. The exhausted bat had lighted on the arch over the doorway into the dining room. I kept my eye on it with my flashlight. After a very, very long time, a reluctant officer finally arrived. I rose to my feet, weak and sweaty, Swiftie mop in one hand, flashlight in the other. "See, it's right there," I told him, shining my ever-ready at the bat. The officer looked at the bat, and then he looked at me. He said, "Well, all I can do is shoot it." Now, he didn't know me. I hadn't been a dispatcher for a decade, so he didn't know that I knew he could not really shoot the bat. So, "Shoot it," I urged him with renewed vigor and enthusiasm. "Shoot it! Do you have a shotgun in your cruiser?" He waited a long time before responding. "Do you have a paper bag?" he sighed. I ran to get one. He climbed onto a chair, captured the bat, and released it back into the wild. I thanked him profusely. Now, there are several other chapters to the Bat Chronicles, but I will spare you, simply saying that bats terrify me. But we are all afraid of something, from the small to the existential. Fear is simply a fact of life, as a part of, as poet Annie Dillard says, the extraordinary rent you have to pay as long as you stay. And mostly, we don't like fear unless maybe it's a scary movie. We don't like that stomach-clenching, weak-kneed, shallow-breathed emotion, that sense of being out of control, of being vulnerable. We try to avoid it, to escape it, which is at the root of many addictions problems, as we know. In another vein, though, it propels some to great achievement, for power and success make us feel less vulnerable and therefore less afraid. And it inhibits some from stepping up to the plate to take a good solid swing at life, which is unfortunate because while we may feel safer staying in the stands, we are almost certainly disappointed by not participating in the game. In addition to those individual reactions to fear, there are cultural responses as well. Fear is what beckons many people into groups, clubs, fraternities, sororities, and less positively, gangs, militias, and hate groups. When we can find numbers of people with shared interests and ideologies, we find comfort within their ranks. Nowhere is this more true than in churches and religious traditions where the shared interests are quite focused and the ideology of serious import. British philosopher and social critic Bertrand Russell said, "Religion is based primarily and mainly upon fear. It is partly the terror of the unknown and partly the wish to feel that you have a kind of elder brother who will stand by you in all your troubles and disputes. Fear is the basis of the whole thing. Fear of the mysterious, fear of defeat, fear of death." Now, while I think he overstated it a bit, it is true that many turn to religion, consciously or not, to help cope with fear. His eye is on the sparrow, says the old gospel hymn, based on the Gospel of Matthew. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. And people are soothed by that sentiment, although it gets all mucked up with the counter teachings of a wrathful, vengeful God. But still there is hope that if the rules are followed and all the right things are done, God will keep them safe. This is not my religion, but I have, in fact, found comfort on occasions in the rituals of some of those religions. A sermon for another time, for sure. Our faith does not give us a lot of those kinds of rituals, although it certainly encourages us to come up with our own meanings and rituals. I did that once in particular while I was still in seminary, almost completing seminary. I stepped into a small outdoor chapel at a county park near our home. I thought about my long journey into ministry and my upcoming ordination, and for some reason, I felt drawn to make the sign of the cross. I have no idea where such an impulse came. I have never been Catholic, but I felt it strongly enough that I chose to respond. I crossed myself, saying, "Roots hold me close, wings set me free." And then I continued upon my walk. I may never do such a thing again, but at that moment it met some inner need, and because our religion gives room for such impulses, I complied. This is part of the beauty of our faith tradition. But where we really shine is in our handling of fear. Ours is a faith tradition that neither ignores nor ignites fear. It makes room for fear. It supports us in our fear. It normalizes fear. And it encourages us to act to rectify all those things that create fear: injustice, violence, ignorance, greed, isolation, when and where we can. We are a church built upon the justice to be found in the common good. When we are fearful, we turn our hearts and hands to doing what we can to eliminate danger, to further soothe those who have been harmed. We honor the individual journey in a communal way, the best of both worlds. We come together to support one another in the search for truth and the courage to make meaningful our lives. We do not fixate on death, considering it part of life that will come when it comes. In the meantime, we busy ourselves with the living of it, with the living of life. We do not fear the shadows, but rather step into them and study them and revel in their mystery. Or sometimes we come together to shine a light in the shadows. We do this in a variety of ways, one of the most common being the reading, sharing, and contemplation of others who have studied the shadows or walked through their depths. Just one of these countless others is the late Reverend Forrest Church, who in his book entitled Freedom from Fear, Finding Courage to Act, Love, and Be, he said this: "Courage is when fear speaks and the heart answers. After absorbing fear's best argument, the heart says no." Isn't that great? The heart says no. The heart says, I will stretch myself wide and claim my time. I will live my life. And I will live it in spite of all of the bats, literal and figurative, that occasionally invade my space. May it be so. And amen. And now let us move into a time of meditation, reflection, and prayer. Let us quiet ourselves, breathing in gently but deeply, emptying ourselves of stress and worry, becoming serene and at ease as we consider these words by Mary E. Grigolia from the hymn. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. Amen. And in the spirit of opening wide, unfurling our wings, and living large, let us go in peace, in gratitude, and in love. And until next week, blessed, blessed be.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Woyaya, 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 woyaya. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know